Right off the bat, I just want to say that I'm not going to include any real spoilers in this review. But if you're the kind of person who doesn't want to know anything going in, then just stop watching. If you're the kind of person who's like, I will take any insight as a spoiler, then don't watch this video. It's fine, it's cool. If you only want to know if it's good or not, then let me just say, yeah, it's good. In fact, it's really good. For many people, there's nothing else that needs to be said, and even then, it wouldn't have stopped any Star Wars fan from seeing The Last Jedi on opening night. It's Star Wars! There's nothing else in the world that brings out a level of enthusiasm in its fans like Star Wars does. That being said, there's a lot to digest here, most immediately in the form of comparisons to The Force Awakens. Episode 8 will be compared to Episode 7. That's just a fact. It's a direct sequel and it's set immediately after the previous film. I'm not reviewing Episode 7 right now, but let me just say, I really like it. It hit all the emotional notes that a Star Wars revival needed to hit, it had incredible production values, and it had just the right amount of nostalgia for someone like me. I know it was a bit too much for some people, and I did roll my eyes at that scene of this was the Death Star, and this is Starkiller Base. And a couple of little things like that. We're like, alright, give me a break, we get it. But I guess the biggest gripe I had with The Force Awakens was that it didn't have anything to say beyond, we're back, Star Wars is alive. I was glad that Star Wars was back and alive again, and the prequels were left behind and wisely ignored, but The Force Awakens didn't really have much to say in terms of grandiose themes or imagery, except for maybe that scene where the space Nazis blow up the Hosnian system and General Hux is screaming like a space Hitler. It's a bit much, but for me, I was sold when the massive crowd of stormtroopers all gave him that space Nazi salute in unison. That was pretty scary. The best thing about Episode 8, on the other hand, is that it actually has stuff to say. Anyway, before we get properly started, I guess a lot of reviews are coming out today and this week, the week before release, so let me just prove that I've seen the movie with a non-spoiler line delivery. There were heroes on that mission. Dead heroes. Scene. With that in mind, a big theme in this movie is the folly of unilateral decision making, of one person going, to heck with protocol or chain of command or due process or common decency or whatever, I know what's best. It's a fairly unique theme in today's landscape of superhero blockbusters where that one person or few people who go against common wisdom and strike out on their own, they're generally portrayed as correct and are always proven right in the end. Without spoiling anything, Star Wars doesn't take that approach. One person doesn't have all the answers. War heroes, legendary figures, hotshot hotheads aren't always correct in their actions. And that's not a rebuke of Star Wars and its reliance on larger-than-life heroes like Han Solo and Luke Skywalker. It's just another way of looking at that age-old battle between the Empire, the First Order, and the Rebellion or the Resistance. And it absolutely works in this film. It subverts the nature of heroes while making us believe in heroes. The best part of deconstructing a key tenet of adventure films is the righteous joy that comes with reassembling it again. The movie also finally says something about that 30-year gap, about the passing of the torch from one generation to the next, and about that relationship between master and apprentice. More immediately than that, though, the dialogue knows when to play fast and loose with jokes, and when to be epic and grandiose, something it does share in common with The Force Awakens. Yeah, The Last Jedi is really funny. It's really dark, but it's got a ton of jokes, a great many of which actually stick the landing and don't come off as hokey or inappropriate considering the massive stakes of the movie. Like I said before, The Last Jedi picks up right where The Force Awakens left off, and the introduction sees Poe Dameron and General Leia and Admiral Akbar and all the rest of the Resistance remnant escaping the First Order on Ilenium, and the dwindling fleet spends much of the movie just flying through space, pursued by the First Order command ship. It's a setup which could get boring fast, but that ticking clock scenario is buoyed by the maybe too many subplots, which all play out around that central focus. In one corner, we've got Rey on the Porg planet with Luke and her efforts to try to get him to join the Resistance, as well as her eerie communication with Kylo Ren, who wants her to join the dark side, while she wants him to join the light. In another corner, we've got Finn and new character Rose, more on her in a sec, on the casino planet of Canto Bight, on a mission to do some stuff that'll help the fleet escape. In yet another corner, we've got Poe and Admiral Holdo's mutual distrust and headbutting battle of wills. Holdo is played by Laura Dern, and she's a perfect addition to the pantheon of Star Wars heroes. The character is warm but fierce, and I just love her pink hair. With all those plots focused around the entirety of the Resistance, I've got to say, The Last Jedi feels really epic. Star Wars, with its tight focus around the Skywalker family, has always been grand, but still reined in on specific individuals. The Last Jedi feels much larger than that, and while Luke himself plays a key role in the story, I don't think he has as much screen time as, say, Han Solo did during The Force Awakens. That movie followed Rey and Finn as they went through a linear sequence of action and adventure. This one, with its focus on the fate of the Resistance fleet, has different subplots and character arcs play out around that much larger focal point, and the movie itself feels much bigger as a result. It's also 2.5 hours long. It's the longest Star Wars movie to date, but it earns its epic scale. It's not needlessly sprawling, but everything is anchored to the plight of the Resistance. I think it works. I think there'll be some criticism of Finn and Rose and the time spent on Canto Bight, but it worked for me. I think the way that plot played off the themes of the movie and those of the original trilogy, that whole weak against the strong and the endless cycle of violence, it's something that'll be important for studying these films in the long run. It's also just plain entertaining, which is important for balancing the tone of the film. It's serious, it's epic, but it's also a rollicking space adventure. It's a balancing act, and one which The Last Jedi maintains throughout, and it needed to be that long, or else it would have had to cut the moments where the movie exhales and settles into its groove. The Last Jedi moves along at a steady pace, but isn't afraid to slow down and breathe. Despite the sprawling plot, it doesn't rush from point to point the way it could have. Sometimes that clashes with the ticking clock of the besieged Resistance fleet, but it almost always works in the film's favor. There's a healthy mix of comedy, darkness, cool action, and important revelations. As for what those revelations are, you'll just have to watch for yourself. And you really should. There's a lot to love and not a lot to complain about. Maybe it'll be too long for some people, and maybe the ending comes and goes a bit quicker than it should, like the last 10 minutes or so. And maybe the whole focus of the fleet being chased by the First Order just won't click with some people, but it worked for me. So, Rian Johnson, I think, deserves a lot of the credit here. In both scripting and visuals, Rian makes some bold moves. As far as I can remember, this is the only Star Wars to actually have stuff like flashbacks and slow motion during the action. It's still recognizable as this franchise, but it's not as beholden to convention as The Force Awakens was, or even Rogue One. This is new Star Wars, and it's got to move on from old Star Wars. It's a central theme of the film, and one which is relayed not just by the characters talking about it, although they definitely do that, but also through the visual identity of the movie. The Force Awakens was definitely old Star Wars, even with its touch-ups to the formula like J.J. Abrams' directing quirks and his occasional lens flare and stuff like that. One thing I actively disliked about The Force Awakens was that the planets didn't look like alien worlds, but like different locations on Earth. Say what you will about the prequels, and we've all got a lot to say about them, but I love that many of the planets look like fantasy locations that would be impossible to realize without cutting-edge technology, some shoddy blue screen and obvious CGI notwithstanding. In The Force Awakens, we have Jakku, which looks exactly like Tatooine, and Ilenium, which looks exactly like Yavin 4. And even the forest on Starkiller Base just looks like a snowy forest. The most imagination there was the Starkiller interiors. I really liked how lots of those walls were made from stone and some of them were covered with metal. It kind of reminded me of the Cuban base from the James Bond movie GoldenEye. Anyway, The Last Jedi's planets bring back that spark of imagination, using a combination of relatable imagery and pure fantasy elements. Canto Bight looks like Monte Carlo or one of those casino cities, but one that's just impossible to realize on Earth. And likewise, Planet Crate, shown in the trailers so it's not a spoiler, has that gorgeous red and white palette that's just not normal, but in a really good way. And those shots of the resistance speeders, mining vehicles, whatever they are, tearing up the ground, those visuals, and I apologize for using such a played-out term, they're just eye-popping. Even beyond the look of the planets themselves, there's so much new visual language in the movie. We've never seen space battles like this in Star Wars before. There's so many new ships in The Last Jedi, and they don't feel like they were designed to sell toys. Yeah, at one point when I saw a First Order Dreadnought, I thought to myself, It's gonna make an awesome Lego set. But it also felt like it was important to the plot of the scene and the stakes of that moment, and not just a shameless commercial for another thing to buy for kids or collectors or hobbyists. There's also a healthy dose of anime influence apparent in the visuals. I don't watch much anime myself other than Cowboy Bebop, so I can't claim to be an expert, but there are certain moments, both in grand displays and smaller beats during action sequences, that feel like they could have been ripped straight from a Japanese cartoon. Okay, so we've mentioned Laura Dern, but there's a couple of other noteworthy newcomers, like Benicio del Toro as DJ, but I don't remember if they ever actually say his name in the movie. He's just like this mysterious, stuttering drifter who gets involved in one of the subplots, but he makes the most of his limited screen time. It's interesting to have a character who's not a total outsider to the central conflict, but who thrives on its outskirts and has been driven to cynicism by a galaxy at endless war. You know, as great as the spectacle of grand adventure may be, the galaxy of Star Wars is not a pleasant place to live. I mean, that's why they call it Star Wars. Everyone's fighting all the time. One day the rebels are blowing up the Empire, and then the next day the First Order's blowing up the Resistance. There are pockets of relative peace scattered throughout Star Wars history, but they never last long. DJ, if that's really his name, is a character without hope. On the other hand, we have Rose, played by Kelly Marie Tran. I don't know who her actor is, and I don't think I've seen her in anything before, but I do think we'll be hearing a lot more about her very soon. She's really cool in the movie because she's just a regular person. Because of the circumstances of the galaxy, though, she's part of the Resistance, and she really believes that she could help to make things better. John Boyega as Finn is kind of caught in the middle. He doesn't really believe in the struggle of the Resistance and just wants to find a way to escape the conflict. Of course, you can't run away from your problems forever, and he has to choose if he's a DJ or a Rose. And beyond that, there's a larger implication at play of what the fight is actually about. Is it more about killing the things that we hate? Are battles and killing and sacrifice their own reward? Or is it about saving the things we love? Of war being the final defense against tyranny and space Nazis, a punishment for failing to maintain peace in the first place. Like I said, it's an epic movie full of subtext to explore and stuff to really think about. Some people will no doubt continue to be perturbed that Snoke is still shrouded in mystery, that his rise to power and the ascension of the First Order is still a big fat question mark, but perhaps those revelations may yet be revealed in the next movie, who knows? Until then, I think we can rest easy knowing that we've got plenty to digest with The Last Jedi. There's a lot going on here. It'll keep us full for a while. Well, I guess that's about all I have to say about The Last Jedi for now. I hope you'll let me know what you think of the movie once you've seen it. You can leave me a comment down below, or you can follow me on Twitter at my name, Zach Wojner. You can check the spelling in the description. I've been Zach, and I'll be around with another video soon.